they wanted to limit.
Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council to order. Happy New Year. This is our first regular meeting of the year, although we did have a meeting last week. We will begin our meeting with an invocation led by Councillor Papp, followed by the singing of the national anthem, led by Councillor Papp, and I would ask all to rise.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, as we begin our last term here on council, give us the gratitude, the fortitude, the accountability, the responsibilities to fulfill the wishes and needs of our community as we look back and we look forward to the future. As well, this evening, let us take a minute, as we will shortly, to recognize and acknowledge the Page family. In particular, Brian, who was so much to them and will be especially honored. God, look after his soul and ensure that we continue to keep that compassionate and caring of our community. Amen.
Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patron of in all thy Son's command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Papp. Thank you all. Before we get into the meat of the meeting, we do have to approve the agenda, and it has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the agenda for the January 13th, 2014 regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? I would ask council to consider just a quick report, a mayor's report regarding the announcement that occurred today from the Niagara Health System and the Ministry of Health. So I would look to a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribiak. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? There being none, I'll call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest. That is any conflicts of interest. And I would ask if any members have any conflicts they need to disclose at this time. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict to item 13.1. My wife owns the adjacent property.
Okay, thank you very much. That is noted. Thank you. Any other conflicts? Can that be noted in the minutes, please? Thank you. The next item, as Councillor Papp indicated, we have a special presentation for the Page family, and the fire chief and I are going to do that. And I would note and acknowledge the several members of the fire service that are also here this evening.
2013, very unfortunate incident. We lost one of our active firefighters, Brian Page. Shortly thereafter, our fires came forth and said that they'd like to put together a memorial for Brian. So they set forth on putting that together. They came up with such a fantastic plaque that we decided to make two. And so we made one for the hall, which will be presented later in the month. And this one I'd like to present to the Page family for to be mounted in your home. And I think, Mayor, you'd like to say some things?
Thank you very much. It was last April that Brian left us, and this council had a moment of silence at our meeting after that on April 15th, and we certainly miss Brian's commitment and dedication to the community. And on behalf of council, we'd like to present this to you.
I always cry. It's like endless. Oh my God, it's beautiful. You guys bunkered
Good voice.
you. I had to keep you. Oh, thank you. That's just amazing. Thanks, Dave. Henry? Oh, Taylor. This is tough, eh?
Unfortunately, Jennifer and Lindsay aren't here, but on behalf of everybody, I'd really like to show our gratitude to not only the firefighters, but to the whole town. Brian was an employee in the summer and in the winter also, besides becoming a volunteer firefighter, and he actually, probably through working with Bob Hill at the arena, he got the bug to become a firefighter. And Bob was retiring from active service, so he gave Brian his number. So that's why, if you notice the pickup truck around town with page 109, that's what that stands for. Brian always wanted to be a firefighter. He tried a few times to apply at different places and stuff like that, but he found his calling in being a paramedic. Unfortunately, he had to go out to Nova Scotia to get a job. But he always had firefighting in his blood. He even told us a story the one time when he was on a call with the firefighters. He actually was telling the firefighters. He was on call, he was on standby as a paramedic, and he was telling the firefighters how to put out the fire. So he never really lost that. But, you guys have been great support for us, and we're deeply indebted. And this is amazing. So I know we won't forget Brian. And because of this, no one else will forget him either. So thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you. Thoughts and prayers are with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. God bless. Thank you, Chief, for and the firefighters for organizing that very memorable tribute. And look forward to the 25th at the installation dinner this year for the fire service, when that will be presented.
Dinner night, and we're gonna present the other plaque to the board.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Now we move to delegations. We do have a delegation, and this is Norma Draper and John Stevenson. Thank you. You told me earlier. And John Stevenson, they're representing Leisure Plan International, the firm that's been hired to do not only our arena study, but other recreational studies as well. And I would invite you to the podium to give us a delegation on that report. And we do have that report with us. Thank you.
What I'd like to do tonight with Norma is take you through an overview of the findings and conclusions and recommendations that we have for your consideration about the two different pieces of research. One is related to arena facilities and one is related to multi-purpose community centers. You have the report about the arena strategy. You do not have the report about the community center provision strategy, but you will be receiving that shortly. It's a much longer, more detailed report because it presents the results of the community survey in detail, so there's a lot of statistics. But we will be sharing with you highlight findings of it and what we think the implications of it will be. Oh, up.
Space.
Okay.
Go on. Sometimes you need twice.
Enter.
Right down?
Yeah.
You should have hired somebody else. Oh. Okay. So the purpose of the, I'm going to go through the arena and Norma will go through the community center. So the purpose of the study that we looked at on the arena side was to establish a baseline of demand, current demand and future demand for indoor ice services in the town, and then dependent on the findings of that analysis, develop a proposed approach to the provision of these services for the future in terms of facilities, but also in terms of the management and operation of any facilities that are recommended. So it's two phases. The first phase is the demand assessment, and the second phase will be the business plan. So as part of phase one, which is the report you have before you, we looked at the current provision of indoor ice services in Pelham, and we analyzed demand and associated facility requirements for 3 time periods: current, short-term future of the next 5 years, and long-term future in the next 10 years. So the result of that would be our recommendation to you in terms of a strategy for the provision of municipal indoor ice facilities to the long term for the 10-year period. And dependent on the deliberations of what we've recommended, phase 2 would take the facility and develop the costs, capital cost estimate of its development, as well as a business plan for its operation, management and operation, as well as a projection of operating expenditures and revenues. As part of the research, we looked at the impact of population trends on demand in terms of current population, age composition, and what would happen over the next 5 and 10 years. We looked at participation trends in indoor ice-related activities from a national, provincial, and local level, just to see what activities are increasing, perhaps, in interest and participation, those that are staying the same, or ones that may be decreasing. We did an inventory and assessment of the provision of indoor ice facilities in the region, which could offer complementary facilities that perhaps some Pelham groups are using currently. We did an assessment of the operation, use, and utilization of the existing ice pad, and we surveyed 14 arena user groups and associations. And that survey was conducted in August. The survey basically looked at soliciting information from the groups in terms of the programs and activities they offer, any issues related to that, trends in terms of participation, facility use, as well as enrollment in the different programs and activities, and their ice time requirements in terms of number of hours. So it was quite a detailed document that they completed for us and sent back to us. And they also gave us opinions about if we were to develop a facility in the future, what would be the most important features of that facility? So 11 of the 14 groups completed and returned the questionnaire. The groups that didn't return were contacted, and they said they were not interested in submitting a questionnaire. Their results, their needs were basically met. But all the major ICE users had input into the analysis. There's a couple of things about the current provision of ICE facilities in Pelham that I think are just as a point of reference to confirm. We have the one indoor ice pad. There was a study done in 2008 that identified a series of significant issues with the physical condition of that facility. It didn't make any recommendations in terms as to the timing associated with repairs. But I think from what we saw and our experience in this thing, that facility is at the end of its useful, efficient lifespan. There's 2 operating seasons. There's an ice-in season, which is about 28 weeks, and then the ice is taken out for the summer season, which is about 24 weeks. You have official designations about the time that's rented. Prime time ice equals about 77 hours per week. Non-prime time is about 52.5 hours a week. There are no designations for summer use of the facility. We reviewed the utilization of the facility for the past 5 years, as well as currently. 83% of prime time is currently utilized per week. 45% of non-prime time is utilized. That's fairly standard split. Non-prime time is the time when very few people are available to use the facility. And that pattern of utilization has remained stable in the last 5 years. Hasn't changed much. The timing of the unused prime time happens to occur at the earlier time period or at the later time period, so it's not really suitable for minor sports groups to use. So for all intents and purposes, for the major users of our facility, we're effectively 100% utilized prime time. We have very little use of the facility in the summer, and that use has decreased in the last few years. Minor hockey uses both the largest number of hours of non-prime and prime time. And you see the breakdown, followed by figure skating and adult private rentals for the prime time ice, and schools and ice maintenance for non-prime. We looked at the impact of future population. We made some assumptions in terms of the timing of the population, but we used the development charges background report using a population projection of 20,110 by the year 2023. So we looked at the impact of that population growth on demand. The regional supply, there's 28 ice pads in the region within a reasonable market area. All except the Ridley College facility are municipal facilities. And there's a mix of type of arena facilities. We've got double ice pads, 4 ice pads, one in St. Catharines, which is a 5-pad arena. The 5th pad is a small practice surface, and 9 single ice pads. The total number of ice pads in the region may increase by 1 based on the development of the ice pad in St. Catharines. But when we compare ourselves to the other municipalities in terms of the definition of ice season, operating hours, and prime time, non-prime time, we're fairly similar. Our level of provision based on a population base is 1 per 16,600. The average is about 1 per 13,850. When you look at the range of provision, we're within the range. As I mentioned, Pelham Minor Hockey does use facilities in the surrounding community for part of their ice time demand. I guess one point I do want to stress is that our ice user fees are generally higher than average for the region. The analysis of demand was done on the basis of current demands, short-term future and long-term future. So currently we have a demand for 63 hours of prime time per week and 23.5 hours of non-prime time. We also identified additional demand, that's in addition to that current demand, for 42.5 hours of prime time ice. And that's accommodating participants on waiting lists, returning minor hockey programs that are held in St. Cat's to Pelham, rescheduling some non-primetime use to primetime, allowing for the development of new programs and activities, but also increasing the current service level of practices for minor hockey. We also identified a demand for 51 hours per week of primetime ice over 4 weekends for current and proposed special events, and only half an hour of non-primetime ice. When we look at the short-term future, again, input from the groups, as well as the impact of trends in population and participation, we identify an additional 7 hours of primetime ice and 1 hour of non-prime time. And the long-term future, another 7.5 to 10 hours of primetime ice, and nothing for non-primetime ice. So if you remember, I said our current utilization is 83% of prime time, and we can assume that it's about 100% because the unused time is not that desirable for our major users, the minor sports. We have an unmet, things that we can't accommodate, demand for 45.5 to 49.5 hours of prime time. In our industry, we use a benchmark of 75% utilization of primetime ice before we consider that the provision of a second ice pad might be justified. That's because of the ongoing costs associated with the provision of this service. So that's a benchmark that's widely used in the industry. That equals 58 hours per week of prime time. The demand that we identified for now and in the next 10 years represents about 59 to 64% of prime time. So there's a shortfall. We're about 8 to 12 hours per week short of that 75% benchmark. And an important consideration is that our demand analysis also includes raising the level of service that we provide in prime time to minors hockey, allowing them to have an additional practice time. So if we look at the impact of that demand assessment, as well as the population projections and the timing, we believe that we may achieve the 75% utilization of prime time during the period just after 2023-2024. And based on that, our conclusion or recommendation to you is that you consider planning the replacement of that existing single ice pad with a new twin pad facility designed to allow for phased development, such that the new one pad is provided to replace the existing facility within the next 5 years, contingent on capital financing, and stage the development of the second ice pad for the time period beyond 23-24. That timing will be based on what happens with population growth and how that impacts participation in the ICE user groups. But from our perspectives in terms of advising you on the kind of strategic investment of municipal funds for the provision of a service, I think we need to keep that 75% benchmark as a pretty firm cutoff point, that if we don't achieve it, then we're being entrepreneurial. And I really don't think this is the type, ICE facilities are the type of business to be entrepreneurial in the current market. Okay, so that's the arena part. Do you want us to just proceed to the next part, or do you want to break and?
So, members of council, thank you for that. Members of council, we do have that report before us, but we haven't seen the next phase.
No.
What's your request? Do you want to keep going and
See
then
the
ask
whole-
questions
let's see
in
the whole
totality?
thing.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead. Thanks, John.
So the second part is the multi-purpose community center. And as I said, one of the main pieces of research is the telephone survey. It's quite a long, involved data, but we're going to hit the highlights and what our recommendations is about that. And at some point, the two findings will be integrated. But at this point, we just want to bring forward the results of the research that we've done. And we hope to have that report to you perhaps by the end of this week. Okay,
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. The purpose of the multi-purpose facility analysis was to determine the order of magnitude and characteristics of demand for existing and potential future participation in indoor aquatic fitness and gymnasium-related programs among residents in the town. So our research activities included looking at demographic trends, participation in national, provincial, and local trends and participation in those activities. And we did an inventory of the existing provision of indoor aquatic facilities, fitness and gymnasium, and multipurpose room related activities and facilities in Pelham and in the regional market area. We used the results of 3 surveys to obtain demand for these services based on the community center. These facilities would be used by both communities and residents. So we did a mix of research activities. There was the arena user groups survey, which John talked about for the arena. It also asked groups whether they had, arena groups, whether they had needs for multipurpose space. There was a survey of gymnasium and multipurpose room user groups and associations in Pelham. And we also included all service providers, so we threw in social service agencies as well, because they may have had multipurpose room requirements as well. So 46 of those groups were contacted. And then quite the major part of research was the community telephone survey of residents. That occurred in September. It was a statistically valid and representative sample of the town's population based on 4 age groups and gender, so we could look at requirements for specific age groups, because they will vary. Mm-hmm. So it was statistically valid and representative of children, youth, and teens up to 19 years of age, 2 age groups of adults, 20 to 39 and 40 to 64, and then seniors, 65 to 64. That involved almost 1,100 questionnaires being done with residents on the telephone. It took over 6,000 calls to households to get that number. And so by doing that number of questionnaires, contacting that many residents in those 4 age groups allows us to extrapolate the results of the survey to the population at a 95% confidence level and 6% margin of error. So it's pretty stringent. The survey lasted 10 minutes. We covered a lot of ground. We asked about people's current participation in those activities, indoor aquatics, fitness, and gymnasiums. We asked whether they were participating in specific activities, and if they were, whether they were participating in Pelham or outside the town. Regardless of where they participated, we asked them who they participated through most often or where, and the basis they participated in terms of membership, paper program, or whether they were participating for free. If they were not participating in indoor aquatic activities, we asked them to identify the main reason why not. We asked their level of satisfaction with the current provision of aquatic opportunities in Pelham, whether they were satisfied with the range and variety of activities, the quality, whether they thought they were conveniently located to them, and whether cost was a barrier or not. We asked whether they were currently members of a YMCA or any other fitness facility, either in town or outside the town. If they were members of the YMCA, we asked whether their level of satisfaction with their membership. And if they weren't a member of a YMCA or any other health and fitness facility, we asked them to identify the main reason why not. Then we described the concept of a new multi-purpose community center and asked the likelihood that they would use it in general. And they were told that it would be located in the area of Rice Road and Highway 20, that it would contain an indoor pool, or it may contain an indoor pool, a fitness center, gymnasium, indoor track, and multi-purpose rooms. So they were told that a variety of aquatic fitness and gymnasium programs and activities would be provided to residents of all ages and families. And they were also told that the facility would be available for use for community recreation groups' use for their programs and activities as well. So once we had their general level of interest in using the facility, we probed further about specific methods of accessing it, whether there were 3 methods tested. We tested an all-inclusive membership, so they would have access to the indoor aquatics, the fitness, and the gymnasium programs. We tested the concept of a pool-only membership, which just allowed them to access the pool, but they could access all of the activities associated with the pool. And we tested whether they would just be interested in individual specific activities on a pay-per-program basis. For memberships, so then we tested even further. So we introduced the concept of a monthly membership fee. And there were different fees based on what they were getting as part of their membership. So there were fees associated with the all-inclusive and fees associated with the pool. And the fees differed by age group because typically you would, in a facility of this type, children and seniors' participation would be subsidized. And sorry, I see the seniors age group, I missed putting that up. It was the same as the adult age group, just for purpose of this analysis. And I'll just draw your attention to the 3 fees. We start with the middle fee, and if people said yes or no, if they said yes, they would pay the midpoint fee. We asked them about the higher fee, whether they'd be willing to pay that. And if they said no, we asked them about the lower fee. Then, just to make sure, we asked them, we asked their preference between the 2 types of membership, whether they would prefer the pool only or the all-inclusive membership. And then we asked whether they would prefer membership or pay-per-program. And then we moved on to their likelihood of participation in each type of program or activity proposed to be provided at the facility. And we tested some factors that might, to determine their importance on the decision to either purchase a membership or participate in individual programs on a pay-per-program basis. So we tested how important the location, the ability to purchase a membership, the ability to purchase a family membership, the importance of cost, and access to a pool as part of their membership. So the findings. The survey of community groups and associations, including the municipality's information, revealed that there was no current, short, or long-term future demand for additional time in gymnasiums. And this is among community groups and associations, there was only minimal additional demand, current, short-term, and long-term future for multi-purpose rooms. And there was current, short-term, and long-term future demand for additional time in multi-purpose rooms from the municipality, but we weren't able to get any specific, there's no information about specific programs and times. Now the community telephone survey results, we found that many residents are currently participating in indoor aquatic fitness and gymnasium activities. That most of residents that participate in walking and running for fitness, cardiovascular equipment, and weights participate for free at home. Most of the residents that currently participate in fitness classes and indoor aquatic activities participate outside the town, primarily at a YMCA. Most adults that participate in gymnasium sports participate outside the town, primarily at a YMCA. And for children participating in gymnasium sports, half participate in the town and half participate outside the town, primarily at a YMCA. That's their current participation in those activities. And in terms of membership or how people wanted to access this proposed facility, there was demand for the all-inclusive membership and participation in specific programs on a pay-per-program basis. There was no demand for pool-only membership. And for the 3 membership fees, each had a negative impact on demand for membership, but that's pretty typical. However, there was no difference between the midpoint fee and the lowest fee. So when we said you have the option to participate at a lower fee, there was no significant difference between those two. And just to give you an idea of the level of demand for participation in indoor aquatic fitness and gymnasium sports at a multipurpose community center in Pelham, the activities are basically listed in order. The ones that stood out, well, the demand is fairly large. There's about 2,000 to 3,000, 3,500 residents. I'm combining all of the age groups there for walking or running, for fitness on an indoor track, and the use of cardiovascular conditioning equipment. Then the next sort of grouping of important or desired activities was use of weights or weight machines, any type of fitness class, recreational swimming, and gymnasium sports. And then rounding out the bottom were the other indoor aquatic activities, aquatic fitness classes, lane swimming, and swim lessons or stroke improvement. So I'll come back to that point about the other aquatic programs in a second. So there's a difference between the results of the community group surveys versus the telephone survey. There's a big difference in demand. Well, we think it's because the current provision of opportunities in the town is limited. The types of programs and activities currently being provided are relatively basic and traditional in nature, and most of them serve only specific age groups or specific genders, or are only offered at certain times of the day. Also, the current provision of indoor recreation facilities is limited in number. Many of them are old and in poor condition, and or they have significant barriers associated with their use. There's no municipal multi-purpose facility in Pelham that functions as a true community center, and there's no municipal gymnasium in town. So the lack of suitable indoor facilities in Pelham may have over the years inhibited many service providers from expanding their existing programs, developing new and innovative programs, and perhaps even inhibited the formation of new recreational groups to provide programs and activities. When we took a further look at the demand for participation in indoor aquatic fitness and gymnasium activities from the community telephone survey, we wanted to look at the nature of the demand and the preferred method of accessing these activities at the proposed center. So in terms of the size and the magnitude of the demand for all-inclusive membership is relatively small. And that's quite a concern, because the membership is sort of your guaranteed revenue generator every month. So we divided, from the results of the survey, we divided into what we call primary and secondary market segments. That's primary market segments are the people that said they were very likely to purchase a membership. They preferred membership over paper program, and they preferred all-inclusive membership at the fee compared to pool-only membership. So, and the secondary market segment is basically the same thing, but it's the people who said they were somewhat likely to purchase. So in total, there's about, the size of the demand is about 1,700 to 2,800 people. Now that's about 50% of what you typically require to support the provision of a multi-purpose community center with an indoor pool. To be financially viable, if you develop this sort of facility with this size of demand market, you'd be looking at a significant annual operating subsidy in the order of about $1 million per year. And the other concern is that the size of the secondary market, I'll just go back for a second. So we got 1,100 to 1,600 in the primary market, but only 800 to 1,200 in the secondary market. The secondary, every year you'll have turnover in a membership facility in the order of about 25 to 30%, and you need to replace those people with new members. So typically the new members come from the secondary market segment. But because the secondary market segment is so slow, you probably go through them relatively quickly, replacing those people that decide not to renew every year. The other concern we have with the market, when we look at the characteristics of the people, about 40% of them are actually current members of the Welland YMCA. Well, 40% of them are members of a YMCA, but like 99% are members at the Welland Y. And yet when we probed their level of satisfaction with their membership, they were all satisfied, either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. So this leads us to think that the provision of a multi-purpose community center in Pelham would have a significant negative impact on the operational viability of the Welland Y, the development of which the municipality financially supported. Also, by providing that community center with an indoor pool, the municipality would essentially be in direct competition with the Y. And for 40% of the demand, those people who want to purchase or are very likely to purchase a membership, an all-inclusive membership, they're already members of a YMCA. So for those, if you accommodated that portion of demand with a community center, you'd in fact be providing an enhanced level of service to residents as opposed to filling a gap in service provision. The service is already being provided. And for most of this market segment, the most important factor to them when they considered purchasing a membership was convenience, as opposed to like cost or anything else. So the indoor aquatic component of the multipurpose facility, we feel, is the issue. There was no demand for pool-only membership. If you remember the chart I showed you of all the activities people wanted to participate in, the indoor aquatic opportunities were not among the top activities that people wanted to participate in. The ones at the top were fitness activities, followed by recreational swimming and gym sports. So the aquatic component is the most expensive of the proposed facility components in terms of both building it and then ongoing operating it. And it's also the facility component that directly competes with the YMCA in Welland. So we would recommend then that an indoor pool not be included as part of the multipurpose community center. However, we would say that to accommodate the significant demand in fitness activities and gym sports and walking on an indoor track, you would provide a facility that would provide those activities. And by doing that, you'd also address those issues by providing a multipurpose community center with those that provided those activities, you'd also be addressing the issues associated with the lack of community center space in the town. So you would be looking at a facility that would contain multi-purpose indoor program and activity space, a gymnasium, and an indoor walking and running track. So that's those are the results of the analysis. The next phase, of course, is to look at the establishing a facility development strategy for the multipurpose community center, incorporating the results of the arena strategy, looking at potential facility management and operational approaches, and then recommending a preferred approach.
So just before turning it over, just to put it in a nutshell, standing back here, if you look at the demand that we identify, the number of people, the characteristics of demand, the impact on the Pelham YMCA, and the reasons for people wanting to be a member and their level of participation. All these things taken into consideration, and also understanding that this is our business. We understand not only how demand drives these facilities, but also what it means in terms of operating. From a municipal service provision perspective, there's no compelling reason for you to provide an indoor pool or indoor aquatics. There's not a lack of access to the services. These programs and activities are available in about a 5 or 7 minute drive from town. The cost of those services is not a barrier to participation. So the service is available. And the level of demand for that component is not significant in terms of the number of participants compared to those other fitness and gym sports activities. So taking all those considerations in, and also recognizing that the pool is the most expensive component, not only to build but to operate, and the fact that from a service provision perspective, it would put us directly into competition for the Y, and we would draw 1,500 members from the Y, which would have a significant impact on that organization. There's no compelling, from our perspective, reason from a municipal service delivery perspective to kind of start to think about entertaining those kind of risks. So that's why we came to the conclusion that the indoor pool component of the facility be dropped. And we look at multi-purpose program space, indoor walking, jogging track, and an indoor gymnasium. All those features that could be used in various ways, not only for recreational or leisure types of activities, but also potentially for community events and cultural events, which would give us the greatest range of opportunities to serve the residents of Pelham without going into direct competition, but also gives us the greatest degree of flexibility so that when we do get to the business plan, we can come up with something that's financially viable. Okay? So that's our perspective based on what we saw in terms of the results, as well as trying to give you the best strategic advice, because there's a capital investment, but the operational investment is also important. Okay?
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. I'm sure that members of council will have questions for you. So thank you for walking us through, especially the second half that we didn't have part of this. So one question that's always asked is, will you provide us a copy? No doubt you will, of this presentation and then the report. So who wants to start off? Any questioning for the presenters? Councillor Ribiak is signaling me. So Councillor Ribiak, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your report. Just for information, I note that essentially the definition of your study was with respect to aquatic fitness and gymnasium-related sports in particular. In the end, I think you mentioned something about cultural activities, but your review didn't include any of the other cultural activities that may require a venue, music, drama, dance, cultural activities. No mention of any of those things. Is there a particular reason why it wasn't surveyed?
We had to draw the line somewhere. because there was no research that existed that we could base this on. And we had a limited amount of time and a certain budget implications. So we kind of drew a boundary around things that were related to the initial idea of the community center, which was aquatics and fitness and those things related to that. Certainly, there's a gap in information about the needs for those types of spaces and cultural issues in the town. But our feeling back in September was we actually started out with a very small study, and we expanded it because there was a lack of information to include culture, and we did have this discussion, would make it even a much larger study. And so it would have brought in like a cultural feasibility study for the cultural use of these facilities. And my recommendation at that time to staff was the types of spaces that we're proposing, or we would propose as part of the community center, the multipurpose program space, for fitness, the recreational component, their nature, their physical nature would be such that they would be able to be used for all types of other activities. So it's not like we would be doing something now that would rule out the potential for use by cultural groups. But if you wanted us to include cultural groups and cultural needs, we would need another 6 months and probably another $100,000 to do that stuff. So the decision was made to proceed with this component.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for clarity, we don't know if there's demand, let alone a substantial demand, if there happens to be one, from a cultural perspective that would justify a rec center. We just don't know. We think that if we do something for sports, we can add the rest onto it.
So my recommendation in terms of proceeding with the development or consideration of development of a community, multipurpose community center is based on the findings of this research alone. So if there are needs for cultural program space, that would be in addition to the ones that we have identified. As opposed to, I'm not coming to you and say you should proceed to look at the multipurpose community center as we proposed, dependent on other needs. I'm saying, regardless of other needs, there is significant demand to proceed just based on this. Now we did review the cultural reports that have been done for the municipality. They do suggest that there is demand for cultural types of indoor spaces and all that, but the way that the documents have been done, it's a qualitative sort of, we think there's demand, there's nothing quantitative. So when we kind of made a boundary, we drew a line around this research, what we were saying is if you really wanted to do that cultural component, you needed quantifiable information. And that's why it would cost so much and take that much time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Others? Councilor Gurley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that. With all due respect to some of the findings that you came up with, the recommendations you did, I have been involved directly in some fact-finding and idea-finding in recreational facilities over the past a couple of years, and looking at reports that have been submitted before from 2001, 2008, these, to my understanding, indicated one pad wasn't enough. And look, I'm not going to go into all of these questions. I would like to present you with some of the thoughts that I have on paper. My card is here. I have given the same questions to all of my council colleagues and to staff. If you could give this a little consideration, I believe the next step in this process will be to involve the public in one way or another, and whether it's an open house or a public meeting or something, so that we can look at your ideas. And of course, the information that you've given us tonight will be made public, so the public can look at it, because having presented it here, it now becomes public knowledge. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of input from a lot of folks that weren't aware that they got this, because I know after you phoned some of these people, they called me and said, this is what I said, this is what, okay, that's great. I know if you had called me personally and said, do you want anything to do with a pool, I would have said, I don't need a pool because I never do it, I don't swim. However, looking at the phase 2 of this, with all due respect to that, a lot of it revolves around pool. You did say drop it, so, I appreciate that, but I certainly would like to give this, rather than to ask all these questions, which will keep us here till midnight, and I don't really want to do that. So, okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Counselor. With that, this is the time for questions. Do other councillors have questions? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple, if I may. In dealing with the community center, what was the profile of the community groups that you contacted?
Everybody.
Well, everybody as defined in,
There were
we've
46,
heard that
right?
you didn't touch any of the
Oh, yeah.
cultural groups, or were you talking to, just profile the groups that you talked to?
If
There were
you,
42 groups.
yeah,
for those.
not including the arena groups. Everybody in the legal guide and everybody that sort of has contact with the.
So they would have
staff.
represented a profile of at least some of the cultural groups that are in a community.
They were, in fact, sent a questionnaire, but it was strictly about, it was about multipurpose rooms,
Right.
meeting rooms, activity rooms, and halls. It wasn't about, it didn't ask about theaters,
Right.
display space.
Right.
So, yes, the
And
cultural
the- and
groups
the
would
answer
have gotten
for-
those surveys.
Okay, and the answer from those groups was essentially
No,
no need.
no.
Okay. If we take the user groups that you did, or the people that you did profile, and we exclude the aquatic component, and then go back and analyze that component that represented gymnasium use, indoor tracks, all of that sort of thing, and apply the same parameters that you do to the aquatic center, for example, the impact on the Y, a degree of satisfaction wherever they are, whether it's in a private sector or whether it's in a public sector such as the Y. How does that play out? Can you?
So we did look at that, and you'll see it in the report when we get to you, get it to you. So if you look at participants in the fitness and those things, there still is a large number, 40%, sometimes 23%, it depends on the age group, are participating in YMCA programs. But 60% are not participating in YMCA programs and are not, and perhaps not participating at all. So we can identify, the report does identify the impact of providing those types of programs and activities in that type of facility on the Y. The thing is, I guess from my perspective, and part of the reason that we have experience in this is that we do the market research and have done the market research for YMCAs throughout Niagara region, so we know what the impact would be, is that the pool and aquatic programming is the most expensive component, and it was the least in demand, right? And that facility really should be something that serves a larger population base than we have here. The fact that we are only 5 or 7 minutes away from a pool is a very significant consideration. So then when I come to what's left, I have significant demand for participation in those activities. We don't provide it very well now because of the facilities we have. A significant number of people who are not members of the Y now want to participate, and that number alone would be enough to justify providing this type of space. If we provide the space, we'll have an impact. Some Y members may come and use it, absolutely. But it's not being driven, we're not kind of going in direct competition. But more importantly, the space is multi-purpose and can be used for all kinds of things. From a management and operation perspective, we're not making any assumptions at this point on who manages and operates that community center, who provides those programs. So there are possibilities. One could be the municipality provides the programs and opportunities. Municipality operates the facility. We can look at, as has been done in other municipalities, we enter into an agreement with a group like the Y that actually comes in and provides that program for us for a fee. So rather than going into competition, as we sit right now, we still have the option open of being collaborative in whatever we do in the future. So there's no assumption in terms of who's going to provide the program and activity. I'm talking about providing a facility to support that kind of stuff.
So just as a follow-up for clarity, you're saying that the 60% who are not currently engaged in physical activity in any capacity but have indicated that they would be interested if the facility were there is sufficient on it in and of itself to support the operation of a facility?
Yes. If we exclude the pool component.
Right.
Yes.
And the extra 40% represents the secondary market that perhaps we could tap into because of the convenience factor, or, I mean, there's a certain turnover that's going to take place in any of these sort of things.
Right, so, yes. So once you get rid of the pool, you look at a completely different operation, and you can look at different models of how to provide the service. And so at this point, I'm not looking at potential number of memberships. I'm not looking at the pool of potential participants in a program. And, you know, we're talking all age groups are interested in participating, which is good because we're serving all the community. And we're looking at sizable numbers of people in each of the age groups who said they were very likely to participate in this activity if it was provided in Pelham at that type of facility.
I have one last question, Mr. Mayor. You made one comment that said that it seemed that you had determined that there was a lack of facilities, and that's why there wasn't a reflection of demand. Particularly when you were talking about the community groups, it kind of sort of harkens to the build it and they will come. And I just wonder what your experience has been in circumstances where you build it. Did they come?
Well, I'm going to answer that a roundabout way. I'm not actually saying build it and they will come in the spirit of what you're suggesting. I'm saying we've just done market research that suggests there is demand to support the construction and operation of a certain type of facility. I'm also saying, but you should be aware, because what we did find out was that there are service providers in the community now who are providing programs and activities. One would theoretically expect that they would say, we think there's a significant level of demand for participation in our programs and activities. But we can't accommodate people because we've got crummy facilities or it's inaccessible or we just don't have it. The groups didn't identify that potential demand. And so what I'm actually saying is I think what's happened is you don't have a lot of recreational service providers in town, community volunteer organizations for indoor sports and fitness activities. And because of that, the ones that are there are very narrow focused. In other municipalities of a comparable size, you might find groups that are actually engaged in providing some of these programs and activities. And by doing that, they would say, we serve 100 people now. We have 100 participants. We're pretty aware that there's a significant level of interest in our programs and activities, but we've never tapped into it because we don't have the facility to offer it. So I think that's the situation we're in, is that the situation as it is now has kind of impeded or inhibited some of that, thoughtfulness about, if we had the chance to provide those opportunities. So there's that. A significant chunk of the demand is going out of town or participating at home. So the profile of participation in leisure activities in Pelham is not characteristic of a lot of municipalities of this size. A lot of municipalities of this size would have a community center. It might be 5 to 10 years old, but they would have a community center. And even if you were not a direct provider of the service, the very presence of that facility would kind of, there would be a community interest in using it. Special events could come here. So for instance, when we look at, you have a hall with the arena. It's inaccessible and it's not great. If we were to combine the community center and the arena as one facility in the future, we could have a multi-purpose space in that facility that could serve the arena, could serve these other things, and all kinds of uses could be made of it. So I'm not at all in terms of professional nature being entrepreneurial. It's just not the way we do things. If there wasn't a demand that we had substantiated and tested and quantified in a statistically valid and representative way, I would be saying, yeah, don't do anything.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other questions? Councillor Papp?
Well, thank you very much. I guess, well, you may have answered it, because that's, from a functionality standpoint, I'm thinking our next step is to establish a new development strategy for the center and the arena. You kind of answered it when you said, you know, we've been talking about sort of, with all due art, and I say it for myself, separate facilities. And my question has always been, why wouldn't you put it under one? I must say I am very satisfied, and I'm very, very pleased, and it's something that we've debated, both Councillor Durley and I, that what we've come to the conclusion that our existing arena has reached its life potential. So the question then becomes is how much more can you put into it? Now the next step is that if we were to construct a multifaceted recreational / ice facility, that it be that would serve that purpose, along with the fact that, as you say, we have not, I'm not sure, and I haven't seen, we would have to financially justify that, and then ensure that the facility management of that is appropriate.
Right.
We have an example, as you know, down the road here, not the Y, I'm talking down past in Port Colborne, where they've, I mean, it's huge, but I kept thinking maybe that's something we should explore.
Well, the one there includes the aquatic component.
Includes
but,
everything, yeah.
You know, from phase 2 of the study, basically would start exploring the implications of different, first of all, the size of facility, the different conceptual design. They could be single, they could be combined.
Right.
What's the capital cost implication of it
Right.
based on the size? And then what are the different approaches for the management and operations?
Right.
So we want to bring in phase 2, here's a model of a municipal provision, here's one of fee for service with an outside, here's a collaboration with the Y, and we can use examples that we know of all the different, and the pros and cons and what the implication is to you.
This has been very helpful, I must say. It is, but I agree. There's still some unanswered questions, and I'd like to see what happens when we take our next steps.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for the presenters? And they've been very good. They've been on their feet for almost an hour here. Thank you for that.
Okay, I have no feeling in my toes anymore.
I have just a couple of questions, and certainly I appreciate your presentation. If we can just go back to the arena component, which not many of us have directly touched on. My understanding is that your recommendation on that is based on the current usage, the current, I'll call it demand that's used elsewhere in the region, and the current, I'll call it pent-up demand. Then that might be sort of the hockey practice, you know, we want to double up hockey practice, etc. There isn't enough of that demand to proceed with that second ice pad, although it's there.
Right. It also includes proposed new programs that groups don't offer now, but if there was ice time, they would like to offer. And yes, the quantity of demand that we can't accommodate in one ice pad, what's left over, from our perspective, isn't sufficient to justify right now the development of a second ice pad.
Okay.
Because the quantity, each week, the quantity of prime time ice that's not in demand is too significant. You know, gonna pay for it. Now, in some situations, and that's why we looked at the region, there can be a regional demand for this type of ice. And based on our survey of the surrounding facilities, as well as our work, because we did a similar strategy for Thorold and for Niagara Falls, the regional demand for ice time is actually going through a transition where a lot of the traditional user groups are struggling. Organization.
Okay, well,
So
that's,
it's not-
yeah, that's
it's
where
not
my
a
question
time-
was going. Some have said, if I can just
Yep.
tease that out a little and build on what you've said already. Some have said, for instance, yeah, Thorold needs ice or whatever, and you said you've done their study. Or Welland has said in the past that they might need another couple of ice pads or to replace their existing ice pads. So you did probe that, you did test that. Can you just
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that?
What happened, I think what happens is the difference between saying, yeah, we could use, yeah, we need ice, yeah, we could use a second ice pad. Okay, how many hours a week are you prepared to pay rent? And suddenly the discussion changes, right? And it's the same, and that's the same thing in most municipalities, because prime time's fully used, there's a waiting list, there's the anticipation, well, if we had it, we could sell it. And what I'm saying is that we didn't ask questions that were just, do you think it's needed? We looked at their 5-year enrollment in all their programs, how many people were in their programs, whether they could accommodate more participants in their existing programs. So very few of them are operating at capacity. Very few of the organizations have waiting lists. A lot of the adult leagues, they don't want to expand because it's a social community type of thing. So we're in a very different ice market than you are in the GTA, which is basically if I had any primetime ice in the GTA, I could sell it to an adult group for $300 an hour. That's not the nature of ice time in Niagara. So given that, and given that we had all the major user groups involved, and we said, tell us the programs you want to provide in the future, how many participants and all that. That's where the estimation of demand came from, and we, applied the population growth as well. So you're not looking at, over the short and long term, a huge amount of demand, pent-up demand for something.
I even built in a bit of, maybe an hour or two extra, because there was a fairly major group in the town that said they didn't need any ice time, and I thought that was a bit odd. And I thought maybe it was more an organizational issue, that if they sort of got their house in order in the next 5 years or so, they probably would need more time. So,
Okay.
I mean, we thought of everything.
So you're at that cusp, right? And so if your population grew faster or by more, it would have an impact. But I guess what we're saying is it's time to be cautious, because part of that demand that we've identified is potential demand, and part of it is also allowing minor hockey groups to have 2 practices instead of 1 practice in prime time. So we are increasing the level of service we're providing to minor hockey. If we eliminate that, the demand drops down even more.
We'll get you in a second. Thank you. I appreciate that answer, complete answer. One other, and this is a bit of a complex question as well, and maybe it's something to talk about and think about, as opposed to just get you an answer and it's done. And it relates to the 2008 survey of the existing arena facility. We have made some minor, I'll call it, improvements to it, and we did some last year, and some small improvements. But something that's out there in the community is the idea of fixing up that existing arena. Now, you've said, and you're making a face right now, you've said kind of forget it and all that. But a concept that's out there is cut everything off except for the ice, and somehow keep that structure and build on to that. And then maybe use that second ice pad, the old ice pad, for some of the demand that's out there, the latent demand. So you're not recommending that at all, you're saying,
So our
So, yeah, fill us in
study
here.
just kind of looked at existing reports. We didn't do a physical or engineering assessment of the existing facility. And our scope didn't include that. We can include that, absolutely no problem. We can look at that in the future. But I will say that the building you had, you could spend $10,000 having a detailed engineering assessment done. That's going to tell you that it's not worth spending any more money at. And there's like a strategic point
yes,
in time when we say it's time to stop. You know, and I use the example as thorough. It was the time to stop 5 years ago. You know, and the more that you delay this decision, it doesn't help anything. So let's think strategically. If we're going to invest in something, are we going to invest in an old facility that will always be substandard? I'm talking from an ICE function, or, you know, finally make a commitment and do it right. So now, using the existing arena facility for other uses, I haven't even considered. If you'd like us to look at that, we can, but no, I didn't consider it.
okay. The final sort of vein of questioning is, again, maybe just for clarity, you've really done these two elements, and you presented separately. You've done these two elements separate. So what you're, just asking, what my understanding is that what you're recommending with the arena portion and the ice time usage is sort of a standalone, and the demand is, and your recommendation is solid, and you're recommending the same thing on the multi-use facility. You're also then combining the two and saying, you know what, it makes a pile of sense to put the two together. Can you just talk about, and maybe it's on the multi-use side, and maybe it's through an answer for Councillor Papp or Councillor Kersey earlier. Do you anticipate, or are those numbers in there? If it's combined, the numbers will be higher, et cetera, or is that separate and would be a bonus?
So not from a demand perspective, because you're looking at the survey as individuals' participation in programs and activities. Okay. So combining them in terms of phase one of our research isn't going to make a difference. To me, you have two streams of decisions you have to make. You have to make a decision about the provision of municipal ICE services. So we made a recommendation about that. And we're saying you have to make a decision about the provision of these other types of facilities. So make that decision in terms of a municipal service decision. That's a strategy. Yes, we want to provide that, because the facility to meet those services can be combined, separate, up, down, could be purple, you know. The facility is like a different set of questions. And what I want to do is say, yes, we agree in principle, we want to proceed to the next stage and look at what the implication of providing a phase twin pad is. And yes, we want to proceed to the next phase of looking at what the implication of providing a multi-purpose community center with these components looks at. Because then I can look at all the different facility arrangements that make sense and say, combined facility costs this much to build, costs this much to operate, will generate this revenue. Separate facilities cost this much, and how much. That's the only way you're going to be able to make an informed decision.
Right.
So, in other words, what you're recommending, and maybe I'll get the CEO to chime in here as well, is you're sort of say, okay, let's say we accept your recommendations, your analysis, which is very detailed. Take us to the next step and see what it looks like, and maybe compare those two options. Or, Mr. CEO, do you want to comment on that at all?
No, that's exactly the plan, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We do have Councillor Durley for a second time.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Durley.
Mayor. I have some concern, Mr. Stevenson, about you're saying the level of service. Now, if minor hockey rents an hour of ice time for a second practice or a third practice, or an adult user group chooses to play 2 games rather than 1 game during the week, what's the difference? The ice is still being used. Like, I don't see
Well,
where...
you subsidize the use of the ice.
We do.
Right? So by allowing them to have a second practice, you subsidize another chunk of prime time.
But the subsidy,
That's the level of service.
the subsidy is based on some cost recovery involved in it as well. So, like I say,
The
it's.
subsidy is that.
I know it.
Let the counselor finish, and
I'm
then I would
done.
ask the counselor to,
Okay.
through the chair.
I'm done.
No, what I'm trying to say is that why it's an increased level of service is that you say you can have ice time for programs and we'll allow you to have ice time for practice. That's standard procedure in municipalities across the province. Very few municipalities will allow minor hockey to have more practices during prime time because it takes away prime time ice from other user groups like girls hockey, which are always demanding. So there's a consideration. We have to provide this much time for games and we'll allow each team to have a practice. So if you increase the number of practices you're providing, or allowing them to provide, to my mind, that's an increased level of service. That's the way I'm trying to explain it.
I may disagree. Okay, let's not belabor. Thank you.
Thank you, counselor. Thank you for the answer. Anything further? I guess the only final question is you mentioned you can have the next report to staff by the end of the week. We do have a council meeting on the 20th, which is next Monday. Perhaps we can receive that then as well.
So that would be the multi-purpose community center report.
Right.
And just as a warning, because it's the results of the telephone survey, there's going to be it's a lot of data. Okay, so it's not a simple thing to read. But it's all documented and the same conclusions and that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'll be a big.
So that's within the art of the possible, and maybe we can get that for next meeting. That's great. I think it would help round out the discussion on this topic.
And my experience has been when you look at the survey information, you might have lots and lots of questions. So if there's a way that you want to kind of if people have questions, they can submit them and then we can respond to them individually. We're happy to do that.
Okay.
Because it can be daunting to read the statistical part of it. And, anything we can do to help understand or explain it, we're happy to do it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation and answering the questions and being on your feet for an hour. Mr. Draper, Mr. Stevenson, thank you very much for it and for your work. We look forward to receiving that document, and then council can receive it formally next council meeting, which is next week. I would ask that perhaps we could move, thank you, to, and you'll provide the PowerPoint presentation to us ahead of that. Is that possible as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So it has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor King, that the report submitted by Leisure Plan International regarding recreational facilities in the town of Pelham be received. And the next steps we heard are that we would receive the next portion that we can read and take a look at. And then maybe next meeting we can talk about the way in which we can move forward and have that outlined. So are we ready for the calling of the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks again for the presentation and for your work. So a long discussion, but I think very fruitful and very helpful. So thank you for that. Now we'll move to adoption of the minutes of council, and it's been moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Lane. The following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read, and that was from our meeting of December 16th and from our special meeting of January 6th. Any errors or omissions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is consent agenda items with their various entries and the request to consider those in block. Are there any items that members may want to, thanks again, that members may want to lift for separate consideration? Councillor Kersey?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question about form. There is one item that I have some questions about, and depending on the answers, it may result in a staff direction. Would it be better to pull that for separate consideration in your mind, or what? Can we deal with it on block?
Let's pull it. It's a large block, so let's pull it.
Okay, 11.6.1, the OGRA.
Okay.
Minimum
All right,
maintenance.
thank you. 11.6.1. Any other items? I would ask that council would lift 11.3.3, which is the consideration of official plan amendment for hamlet designation. I think we need a little bit more information on that, so would ask that we would lift that one as well. Any other items? Thank you. Then it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. 1, recommendation of Committee of the Whole of December 9th, 2013. Recommendations of the policy, 2, recommendations of the Policy and Priorities Committee P11 of December 16th, save and except for Resolution 2013-12-16-052 regarding policy S301-27, which is the short-term disability plan policy, which will be presented at a later date. And the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of December 9th are also included. Minutes of the Policy and Priorities Committee of December 16th, P&P, are included. Staff reports for action and information, the site plan agreement and CIP, that's Community Improvement Plan, grant for 1518 Pelham Street. The zoning bylaw amendment to permit a dog park, which is file number AM0413. Consideration, that's been lifted. Number 6, action correspondence of routine nature, the AMCTO, which is Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario, I believe, Municipal Management Internship Program. Number 2, Lipa Park Community Festivals and their special occasion permits. Number 3, Lookout Village, which is requesting and has some concerns regarding municipal addressing on Regional Road 20. Correspondence regarding 1022 Pelham Street and that proposed development, and there are 15 correspondence items. Number 7, some Niagara Regional reports, integrated community planning, various reports. Which one was lifted? Oh, thank you. The minimum maintenance standards was lifted, so a thank you letter regarding from the Alzheimer's Society with some support. And our coffee break. The East Ferris letter to Premier Wynne regarding small and rural and northern municipal infrastructure fund. The Township of Mulmer regarding assessing of properties. And then finally, some committee minutes for information, and they include the Committee of Adjustment hearing of December 3rd and the Pelham Heritage Committee of November 21st. Are there any discussions on those items under the consent agenda? Councillor Durley, Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, 11.7.2, the Heritage Committee, I regret to say that another member has resigned from that committee, and I'm sure we'll be receiving a letter in that regard. Andrea Johnson is, due to work and personal commitments, is unable to proceed, so she has submitted her resignation, and the committee is going to be dealing with it at our next meeting.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, Councillor. That's too bad. A very valued member of that committee. Thank you. Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want some clarification with respect to 11.4.1, the AMPTO Municipal Management Internship Program. I read through the details, and I understand that this is a paid internship in which there's a cost sharing with the province. And because it's a paid internship, obviously we can expect to have some value for that money. I'm just wondering whether staff might be able to indicate what role they anticipate the intern to be playing, and indeed whether that role is instead of or in addition to other summer employment or other kinds of part-time employment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pupil, are you able to answer those questions?
I can answer the questions with respect to the internship program. There's candidates that apply to the province to become ones that you might interview for a specific position. The position would be in addition to, and it is guiding them towards careers in certain departments within the municipality. They would cover up to $20,000, I believe, if it's still the same, towards a rate that you would pay them that would be in addition to the $20,000. Obviously, it's usually around, in finance, a $40,000 job. And at this time, we are not looking to bring someone in-house for this year.
Sorry, could you clarify that?
Yeah.
Because I thought what's before us is to recommend that. When you say in-house, maybe that's...
In finance, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if there's another department that's looking to
so it'd be
bring someone
in other parts of the
Yeah,
municipality. Okay, thank you. Your question, Councillor, was for the entire municipality, not just one department, is that correct?
Exactly. I'd like to know
Okay, so
what we
Mis-
intend this intern to do.
Mr. CAO, maybe you can answer for the entire municipality.
I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, can you rephrase the question for the CAO? He's just, I think the councillor's looking to say, if we're applying, where are we hoping to get some assistance from the individuals that we're hiring?
Well, to answer the question, Mr. Mayor, I think that we would be looking at a sort of a broad-based approach to a number of different areas so that they become oriented, familiar with different aspects of the operation. So there would be time with, a lot of time interns would spend time with the CAO. They might spend time in different parts of the organization. So to be frank, I haven't determined how that would be allocated or whatnot, but that's the general thinking on it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that case, I think I have a concern, and let me see if I can express it. An intern is going to take a considerable amount of management and training time. That's the nature of internship. We are paying, as our treasurer has suggested, at least half the cost, so we can legitimately expect some value in return, but I don't see a value in terms of someone simply floating through and learning our operation, but not necessarily contributing something to our cost. So I just wonder whether we're heading into this thing opportunistically, hoping that somebody will come out and that will provide us with some value, or do we actually have a plan that we might be able to use an intern for? I'm just a little unclear, and it leaves me a little queasy.
We certainly don't want you queasy.
Thank
Mr.
you.
CAO?
Well, I guess the point of the program, Mr. Mayor, is so that you're looking at potential youth, I guess you could say, that would be interested in getting involved in a career in municipal government. And I know that there is some, there's obviously some time and effort required to do that. But it's also with the hope that, you would be helping an intern gain some practical skills that would want to enter into the municipal sector. So would that be specifically in Pelham? I don't know. But I know that's why the program is there. It's to expose and encourage people to pursue those types of careers. As far as the work goes, there is a lot of work that an intern could do with little training. I know, for example, in my office, it certainly would be an orientation to the role, but also a lot of work doing research and drafting, basic documents and those sorts of things would be some of the areas that we'd be looking at. So, I mean, there's plenty of work to do. And, I understand the councillor's concern, but the point of the program is to try and encourage people to enter into the municipal world.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, anything further on that?
I'm not sure that I'm fully understanding of this. The fact of the matter is, we are going to be paying for somebody to spend time here to see whether that person wants to be here. I would suggest through you, Mr. Mayor, that perhaps we can think of what that work is that can be done, and have a plan in place that if an intern comes on board, that there are some objectives that are going to be achieved in addition to that individual learning that municipal life is wonderful to be in, and they should spend their lives in it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just comment on this. I think that's a prudent way to move forward in terms of maybe defining it a little bit more, and I'm sure if the municipality was selected with this program, then some more rigor would come to it. So I think that's certainly prudent. But I do want to speak just very quickly on the experience of an intern. I was very involved in co-op at the University of Waterloo. These students that go through this program would be of university caliber. Great work experiences, and I tell you, I worked a lot for the various areas that I worked in and added a lot. So I'm confident that if an intern is placed here with the municipality, that they would certainly add much to the town. I do note as well that we do have a staff in the finance area whose daughter went to a small municipality up north for the summer as part of this intern program. It's Mrs. Ronald, and had a wonderful, wonderful experience and helped the municipality so much. So I think it's a benefit both ways, and I think it's personally it's a fair way to balance it off. Great experience for the individual and benefits to the municipality. Those are my comments. Councillor Durley, on this matter?
Yes, of course.
Okay, go ahead.
In my opinion, co-op does not necessarily equal internship. However, that being said, I'm hoping that in the direction, maybe we could include that each of, this be brought up to a senior management team meeting and look at, in one situation I'm hearing, we don't need anybody, another, they may need things, and again, building on Councilor Ribbiak's comment, let's see the need, and in fact, if that is the need, because there are co-ops, we do have an opportunity of college and high school students that do come in and help us out on a co-op basis, which basically is, we may give them a per diem, or we may give them some kind of a stipend. However, it's not a full firm commitment of, we're going to pay you X number of dollars, and we're going to train you, and then hope to get something back. So, there is some cloud around here. I agree, it's a great experience for the student who is going out. However, as Councilor Ribbiak said, it's also an investment here. So, like I say, co-op does not equal internship. Internship does cost money. Co-op quite often comes with the gratitude of the student for having the opportunity to learn, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's high school co-op. Certainly part of that. Thank you. Councillor Papp, did you want to comment on that?
It's January 22nd, folks, is the application. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to be as simple as possible. You're going to apply? Yes? Good. And then we'll have to predetermine an appropriate program for them to benefit from this. That's what I presume, right? Okay, so we'll take it. I was a former instructor in this, so I read with fascination how this is all evolved, and this is, no matter, there's obviously always areas within the municipality that intern or interns would benefit from being a placement in this type of situation. So I congratulate you for doing this. This is very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that particular item? Are there any other items under the consent agenda that councillors would like to ask questions about or discuss? I'd just like to highlight the, sorry, Councillor Kersey, did you?
A very brief comment,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor, 11.3.1's the Nunziata
Yes.
development. Very, very pleased to see this happening. This, I mean, well, I believe that it's a very aggressive project. I think it's a fantastic addition to our community, and it's great to see that the CIP is being taken up in this, and hopefully that'll send a message to other property owners in the CIP areas, and hopefully we can see some more uptake.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I was just about to comment on that, so thank you for that. No, that's good, because certainly you had an extensive hand in developing those. And it is great to see that in the community and new improvement in downtown, and that's the vision of the community improvement plan. And it certainly looks like a wonderful site plan as well. I actually, just to your point, hopefully it'll spur other development. I shared it with another property owner in the downtown area, and they were a little bit surprised about the level of incentive that's available, how the municipality work together, et cetera. So hopefully it will lead to other developments, and it's something that we can encourage. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Anything else on that site plan agreement? No, I think it looks great. The municipal Lookout Village municipal addressing concerns, I did have a meeting with them, as they said, and you see in the letter there's so many concerns. I said, you know what, we need to send this to council and get staff to work on it, because it impacts so many things, from EMS to fire to addressing to property tax rolls, etc. So I'm very pleased that they did send us a letter, and that the recommendation is to for staff to work together with them on that. Anything else? Councillor Ribbiak, you had something? Go ahead.
Thank you. With respect to 1144, this is correspondence regarding 1022 Pelham Street. Just want to, for purposes of communication more than anything else, indicate that I believe we are looking at redoing a public meeting with respect to that property. And I think that would be...
That's coming up later on the agenda, 14-2, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and certainly the letters, correspondence we received will form part of that discussion as well. Thank you for highlighting that. Anything else? Councillor Durley, I'm sorry, I didn't see
Thank you,
anything.
Mr. Mayor. The recommendation to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a dog park, no problem. Just that as this moves forward, as I mentioned before, I want it locked solid, etched in stone, that there is absolutely no responsibility or no liability that can come back to the town because of this. We're saying that, okay, the region operates these things and all that, but joint and severable scares me. I want to make sure that it's ironclad that has been happened, because as I sit here, I anticipate there is going to be something that's going to happen somewhere along the line, and I would hate to be the one that's on the hook for it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And as a point of information, the region has approved the budget for it. We have the budgeted money, so I think we do have a report later about how much they've fundraised. So that is moving forward. So thank you very much for that. Do you want to hear from the CAO on that?
No, the issue is not the funding. The issue is the potential liability, and that concerns me deeply.
Okay. Mr. CAO, do you want to respond? It's something to look into. You got the point? Okay, thank you. Anything further? All right, ready? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And all the actions out of that. Councillor, who was it? Councillor Kersey, the Good Roads Association Minimum Maintenance Standards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I read this with interest. It's almost a non-report that Ogre was getting excited about, because really the judge, all he decided was that the whole reason for the lawsuit was moot because the city of York actually withdrew the reliance on the municipal minimum standards. So I guess my question is, how do we approach the municipal minimum standards, and what do we utilize them for? Perhaps our director of infrastructure could answer that question.
Mr. Mantle, I was thinking about you.
Of course. The minimum maintenance standards are used by the town, like Public Works Department, for all road patrols, ensuring that the roads are kept to a certain standard. That's the minimum standard is what they are. It details the size of potholes, when it needs to be repaired. If it's not repaired at a certain time, within a certain amount of time, that could be a liability if there's damage to a vehicle. So it details, I guess, size and degree of response to all sorts of repairs needed to municipal streets within the town.
To be referenced in this report to a couple of different cases, the Giuliani case, in which the court sort of said that even though the community relied upon the standards in their defense position, the courts found that they still were liable, and then in the York case, they just withdrew it because I guess they felt there was nothing to rely on there, and so I'm just wondering, you know, what's our position with respect to that in the event of an action being put forward? Do we rely on that? Do we have legal opinion on the applicability of these standards, you know, in our defense, that sort of thing?
We continue to use them. They are it's in a municipal act, and I think I read that a little bit differently. I think the way that started out was that the region of the municipality was found liable initially with an icy road condition, and the plaintiff won that case, and the municipality lost, and then it was appealed. And I think in the appeal process, the municipality came out on top after all, is how I read it. And there's more to it than what you've seen there.
Right. I wonder if Mr. Mayor, if it'd be worth a referral to staff to get a report. It refers to new standards that were brought out by the government as well in 2010, and whether it'd be worth getting a legal opinion as to the applicability of these and the reliance upon those if an action is brought to our community.
Okay. I think certainly council can do that. I know that this council, or perhaps it was the last council, dealt with this issue, and I believe we were one of the funding municipalities. We gave funding to this lawsuit, or these types of lawsuits, to the Ontario Good Roads Association. And because it was felt at that time that there needs to be some sort of standard, just one can't expect that if a pothole forms an hour ago, that the municipality is going to be there within the minute. And so the standards, as I understand it, have some sort of reliability to say, well, if it's a collector road, we're going to do it in one day. If it's a backcountry road, we might be able to take a couple more days than that. And I understand that we actually link our, what's it called, PSR, public service request, to those standards. So it's important for all municipalities, and that's why the Good Roads Association has taken this up with such vigor and was so pleased that they won the case, as it were. Having said all that as background, certainly I think staff can provide additional information to council in written form that would, I think, be along those lines and help out. So there's previous reports that have come to council that can be provided. Mr. CA, do you have any further comments?
We can certainly bring something back to council for their information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Papp, you want to add to this?
Along those, I think I'm very pleased with that, Mr. CAO. Mr. Mayor, there has been in the past, as Mr. Manos indicated, we've used those standards to maintain our roads, but there has been, I'll use a generalization, there has been action and then questions raised about those standards and how they're applied. So I think it'd be worthwhile with an upgrade of the standards in 2010 and to find out from our legal advisors and our staff how appropriate, how does it protect us, as you hear me say, how does it immunize us to make sure we don't get caught in a situation that those standards are in fact by which we hold our roads to those levels. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have full confidence that our staff are doing an excellent job because our roads are, I think, second to none in the region. There's no question about that. I also have confidence in the standard. I don't have confidence in the judicial system because when judges make judgments, they sometimes don't look at these things. And there is an article in this month's Municipal World whereby a driver swerved on an icy road and was involved in a head-on collision, and there was no fault given other than the fact that the road was slippery. And I'm just wondering what kind of judgment's going to come from there. So perhaps if staff can refer to that and maybe follow up on that, because it is a scary thing. Some of the judgments that come down from some of these judges are sometimes don't make sense to people that don't understand the judicial system, I guess. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. So, Councillor Kersey, a motion to receive, seconded by Councillor Papp, and refer to staff for a report on this, as has been outlined. I know the clerk's taking notes. Are we okay with that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. So I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you.
Councillor Kersey and
Kersey Papp. Thank you. The next item is the hamlet designation, and this was raised. Council will recall we had actually it was raised when Councillor Beatty gave his presentation, and we had a resident of Pelham, property owner, present at the region, and we asked for additional information. I guess the way I'm reading it is that there is some, what's at page 2, it says here, current official plan. Ridgeville is designated as rural commercial. Permitted uses are generally restricted to small-scale commercial and industrial uses and that support the surrounding area, etc. And we certainly have a wonderful development that's developed in that area. It was the first area in town where the downtown was revitalized back in 2002, 2003, and or maybe a little bit later than that, but right in that area, the early 2000s. And it's, I guess what I'm wondering is if there's an opportunity to perhaps keep what we have there in the current official plan. I looked at the zoning bylaw. There's all these properties that are zoned rural commercial. So when we think back to our experience with the fire hall, where it's zoned a certain way, you can put in a trucking company or whatever it is. The same thing. This is allowed, but there's no sort of general policies other than a grandfathered zoning bylaw. Now, staff are recommending that we receive it and that we don't essentially do anything because of all the policies, but I'm I guess I'm just looking for more information. I don't know if staff are prepared to answer that now, but is it possible to somehow maybe put it and say that's a hamlet because of what's going on in the development that's there? Ms. Smythe, I see you here. I don't know if you're able to answer that or whether we should request additional report. Ms. Smythe.
Mr. Mayor, as the report indicates, that any opportunity to examine the redesignation of lands, considering hamlet designation, would require municipal comprehensive review. So essentially, when the new official plan becomes forced into effect, every 5 years, typically under the Planning Act, there is an opportunity to re-examine the policies and designations of that plan. So the next opportunity would be in that time frame to see if that designation could be re-examined. Also considering the Greenbelt plan provides very limited opportunity for lands that are classified in the unique agricultural area, because again, there is only in that along Canberra Road, maybe under 10 sites that are used for commercial purposes. Majority of the lands in what we want to consider hamlet is primarily agricultural. So there is the risks, the Greenbelt has indicated in their policies, removal of the agricultural lands. And so at all costs try to avoid that. So not only would it recommend a municipal comprehensive review, there'd also be an amendment to the regional plan as well. So it would be a huge substantiated undertaking to redesignate that particular area.
I didn't see the piece here about the comprehensive review, but
Yes,
we are in the
it's-
middle of, we have an adopted official plan, but it's before the Ontario Municipal Board, and I wondered if there was a window or an opportunity to make a change in this case. So in the current, it sort of feels like we're losing something that was here. It's rural commercial,
The hamlet designation was never there.
but it was in North Pelham by contrast.
And the reason for that is because it's a larger settlement area than this particular area. So through the growth plan, so there's different provincial legislation and criteria that has to adhere to in order to be classified a settlement area. And in the circumstance of North Pelham, it met that particular criteria. So it was identified in the growth plan. And again, municipalities were brought into the discussion of the most economically and feasible areas for sustainability from a settlement perspective. North Pelham was one, Fenwick, and Font Hill. Ridgeville was never identified as a settlement area.
Would, just another question if I might, colleagues. I guess two questions. So the first is, the zoning will be grandfathered. So if there's zoning there for rural commercial,
Okay.
somebody will be able to do a rural commercial operation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If they meet whatever the criteria is. Okay.
That's correct.
And then the second is, we've talked as a council, and it was in some of the strategic planning documents, of the possibility for a community improvement plan, a CIP, just like we have for Fenwick and Font Hill, that maybe one would be in order for the Ridgeville area. Do we know what the impact is on that of this hamlet designation, or just simply these commercially, what's it called here, rural commercial areas?
I wouldn't know that information right now. I'd probably have to go back and get some information
Okay.
from regional colleagues, actually.
Okay. So
Report back to council.
Pardon? Councillor Kersey,
Thank you,
you
Mr.
might
Mayor.
know from your work on that.
A CIP is really a tool that the Municipal Act gives to local government to improve any area. You can declare the entire town a CIP area if you choose. And you can set the parameters of what that CIP funding and grant program and incentive programs are directed to do. So I don't think the designation of whether it's a hamlet or not a hamlet
Would hinder that.
would hinder that in any way, shape, or form.
Do we want to, Do we want to get that in writing, maybe refer it back to staff, so receive it and refer it back
Let's find out.
and get the answer to that?
Sure.
Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you. With respect to that, I'm just wondering as well, and maybe someone can answer that, whether when we make a shift to form-based zoning, whether that isn't also going to provide a layer of protection for that area.
For the impact of form-based zoning, okay. So, Councillor Kersey Ribbiak, would you move that we receive it, send it back to staff, just to find out those two information pieces? One, the impact on the potential for a community improvement plan, and two, what it might look like under form-based zoning when one has this grandfathered zoning. Okay, is there any additional items to add to that? So that was a Kersey Ribbiak, and I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item is correspondence requiring action. And it's noted that Councillor Kersey has declared a conflict at the start of the meeting. It's been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. Correspondence received December 30th, 2013 from Pelham Printing regarding a paving agreement be received, and that the correspondence be forwarded to staff for report. Any discussion? Are we ready for, we can talk about it when we get the report. Councillor Durley?
Yes, I just really have one question. There's, the applicant states in terms of the original agreement, in exchange, quote, unquote, okay, in exchange for allowing the town to proceed with the arrangement, the town would remove several trees and would pave my parking lot after the construction was completed. I want to see if that was in the original agreement or not, because in fact, if that was, that would perhaps change the whole venue of what we're looking at in that particular situation. Just the exact wording from the letter that we have received, and that really concerns me. If in fact the statement was made before, well, I think we need to give it consideration. If
Okay.
it wasn't made before, we need to make sure it wasn't said before.
Okay, thank you. Staff can enter that in the report, and I know there is reference to the letter, to a report that, I think the letter said something there was, he heard there was a report. Yes, there was a report that came to council, so it's probably important to look at that report as well, that council approved something, so. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And can we ask Councillor Kersey to return, please? Thank you. Next is staff reports requiring action, and this one is regarding 1022 Pelham Street. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the issue sheet regarding 1022 Pelham Street be received, and that council direct staff to commence with convening a second public meeting regarding the proposed development.
Your report.
Oh, my report. Well, let's do this. We have people waiting, so let's do this. Convening a second public meeting regarding the proposed development to be held on March 24th, 2014. Councillor Ribbiak, you wanted to talk about it earlier. Do you want to meeting now?
I knew I'd read that we were thinking of another public meeting with regard to this subject, and really my point raising earlier was just to bring it up as a point of communication, and we're doing that now, so I'm satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering the rationale behind this. The error in the first report has been made perfectly public, and in fact, the use as a service station / whatever was not agreed on by the OMB decision. We have received 15 or more issue statements from folks telling us their concerns and the reasons for their concerns and all that. I'm just wondering, in a second meeting, will anything change other than the fact that the report, which has been corrected, will be made public? Like I'm thinking the public was perfectly clear. The explanations that were given at that meeting were perfectly clear, and the number of emails and the different scope of all of the objections and reasons for the objections are loud and clear, in my opinion. I know that what's out there, and I know the feelings that are out there. I'm just wondering if a second meeting would it be redundant? Would we be hearing anything, or would we be hearing something new, perhaps through you to the planner? Maybe it is something that legally we need to do. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Smythe?
Mr. Mayor, through to you. Yes, under the Planning Act, if new information comes forward, it's a requirement to host a second meeting to inform council and also public of the information. Again, this information that was researched after the public meeting has been able to, again, it's building with respect to getting a good understanding on the history of the site, because at the time I didn't have that information available. Not only that, but there is also the timeline on the designation of the site. So I think it's an opportunity to provide that clarity for both council and public. With respect to the proposed second meeting, town has met with proponent last week. So essentially we've identified the number of issues that were raised from both the public and members of council. That public meeting has not been confirmed. So essentially the ball is in the proponent's court with respect to what he intends to do going forward. There may be changes on the application. Further information may be required for him to investigate, to come forward. So that date is not confirmed.
Okay. So we may have to put some flexibility into the resolution.
Just-
Councillor Durling?
Just so that I understand, now, it is up to the proponent, it's up to Sam to say, I want a second public meeting, or is it statutory that the town host this?
Sure. Mayor, through to you. Under the Planning Act, if new information comes forward, it's a requirement to have a second meeting. But there is no time restrictions as to when that meeting has to occur. So that is the reason why originally the thought was in a couple months' time. But again, the proponent is now re-examining some options. And also considering the official plan, the adopted official plan warrants certain studies or re-examination of some information. He needs some time to gather that, and before he feels comfortable enough to come forward in front of council and public.
Okay, Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that explanation, and I look forward to the second coming.
Okay.
Sorry, second meeting.
We're both.
Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you. I was just going to say that certainly I would be interested in hearing what the proponent has to say in light of those changes. It's not just for the public to tell us what they think, but also for the proponent to make their argument for us as well. And I think it behooves us to hear both sides of this over again.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to get some clarity with respect to the meaning of urban highway commercial as in the adopted official plan. As I read it, it indicates that an automobile service center is an eligible use. And while it may not be a gas station, it could be an oil change station that would fall under that. Now, is that a correct interpretation? And how does our current bylaw reflect on that in terms of how does the bylaw reflect on what the urban highway commercial designation is in the official plan?
Ms. Smythe, can you answer that?
Mr. Mayor, through to you. The urban highway commercial designation, if you refer to the timeline, the rationale behind that designation at the time is the neighborhood commercial bylaw had a gross floor area of 10,000 square feet. So again, it was forced into effect. So the urban residential designation, which was there originally, allowed for only 1,000 square feet. So therefore there was a deficiency with what was in fact there and what the designation allowed. So the architect of the official plan had come to understand that because it wasn't allowing full capacity as to what was allowed, the urban highway designation was the best designation to put there. My discussions with the consultant, all the permitted uses at the time when there was the redesignation, it did not come forth about the applicability for all those permitted uses that would be found on Highway 20 versus in this particular location. However, there's not to say it's not applicable or compatible, but there's criteria and there's a rationale and justification for that. And that is what the proponent will be seeking further information on. I don't know if I've addressed your
very good,
question
Councillor.
enough.
So because that designation is there, it now puts an onus on the proponent to bring forward a rationale for the particular use that he wants to put on that particular space.
That's correct. That particular designation, the region provided commentary, and the commentary was to prepare, or any commercial space over 1,800 meters squared, which is approximately, I think, 1,700 square feet, something to that effect, would require a market impact study. And essentially what that study's to do is to identify its compatibility, its demand, and there's all these other criteria that the region had indicated to be included under this designation. So this is something that the proponent will be looking at. Because the council has adopted this designation in this particular location, the proponent is just doing its due diligence to have the zoning conform to the designation, which there means that having the application for a gas station and the application for the oil change, essentially he's just doing doing the process that would meet the designation. So because the auto sales and service is there, the bylaw will have to kind of conform to that designation, and that's what the proponent is seeking to do. So he's just making the whole bylaw, and not to mention, the designation of the NC is only a portion of the land. So he's considering the entire, rezoning the entire, the lands to be under this commercial zone.
So, because of the decision by the OMB,
Yes.
how does that decision of the OMB impact on the current OP designation of the, because the current designation came after the OMB decision. So how does that decision impact on the current designation in terms of what's an allowable use on that property?
Okay, there is no direct impact, to be quite honest. The OMB decision was on just strictly the zoning. And again, new information has come forward. What in fact happened was the information I had on the file at the time in preparation for the public meeting, the preamble was essentially a summary of the application on that, the zoning of those lands. Unfortunately, there was misinterpretation on my part. So I didn't get the full understanding as to why there was the order. Now getting an understanding, the applicant at the time dropped the gas bar, gas station as a permitted use. The appeal was actually on, there were several parts on this parcel, rezoning it from just a development to a residential and multi-residential. So those were all appealed. And the gas bar permitted use was actually withdrawn from the overall application. So that's why it's not found in the bylaw. And again, my apologies, I didn't have that information with me at the time. But again, so that's with the zoning. Now, because council has adopted the designation to allow this as a permitted use, the proponent is now responsible to have the zoning conform to those designated those designated uses. So he's just,
So there's no onus on the municipality to make the zoning reflect what's stated in the OP. I mean, it seems like it's almost a circular argument. We adopt a certain designation in an OP.
yes.
It would seem to me that the onus is on the municipality to follow up with a zoning that would conform to that and in fact enforce what the vision was that was placed in the OP. But we're left in a situation where we currently have a zoning that is not in conformity with the OP. So the proponent could either sit back in the woods and wait until we redo our whole zoning bylaw, and presumably we would do whatever we feel like we want to incorporate in the zoning bylaw to enforce the OP.
That is
Or he
very-
could take the bull by the horns.
That's correct.
And so he's taking the bull by the horns.
Yes, we had provided that option to the proponent to hold off, first, to hold off until the official plan becomes forced into effect. And also, understanding that, yes, the town has now acquired consultants to undertake the zoning bylaw exercise, and knowing the time frame was not suitable to his needs. So he did decide to proceed.
Just as a further follow-up, because the OP has designated the site as urban highway commercial, and within that urban highway commercial designation, there is a range of allowable uses, albeit with strings attached. Is there an onus on the municipality to structure the bylaw to enforce that designation at some point in time, wherever it may be? Is there an onus under the Municipal Act that or the policy plans that the municipality must bring a bylaw into conformity with the OP and such that they read as, contiguous documents that make sense?
Yes, that is correct. And that is the intention of the town, to do that.
Yeah, I think it's B147. I got my fine-tooth comb out tonight, Councillor, on this issue. It says that all lands within the urban highway commercial designation shall be placed in an appropriate commercial zone. Probably people would spend money to debate the word appropriate. In the implementing zoning bylaw, vacant lands will be placed in development or holding zone where only existing uses are permitted. So there's some language there, and I presume that that would also be part of your report. What does that language mean? It is a vacant lot, it does have a use, et cetera. But in general, it sounds like the planner's saying the zoning bylaw is then to follow up on the official plan. And that's why I think we're going through with the form-based zoning. We're doing the zoning bylaw this year.
So I think regardless if there was an application on this site, the same type of exercise would occur from a municipal staff level of looking at the designation, what is the existing zoning, and does it conform? If not, then there's opportunities for us to ensure that there's conformance with the official plan and then the zoning. And that's the exercise we'll be undertaking this year and going forward.
Just as one follow-up, Mr. Mayor, if I may. So just to use our court's words, is the whole argument then moot? Because if we are bound by the Municipal Act and the various planning documents to align our bylaw with our official plan designation, whether we allow the proponent to go ahead with it or we're forced to put that in and then he gets to do it whether he brings it forward or not, he wouldn't have to go through the process. The whole exercise seems to be somewhat moot. I mean, it seems to be almost a gnashing of teeth and an upsetting of the municipality over something that eventually is going to happen anyway.
That's a perspective to take, of course. There is, again, site plan control. That's another planning avenue that we can have any individual on a particular site which has some contentious issues that the municipality can enforce, that things get done. For instance, our vision on, urban built form, such that it's compatible with the town's small village perspective. Bringing forward buildings closer to the road and not so much seeing parking lots and landscaping, buffering, There's all of these different elements that it would be captured through another planning type of process, through site plan.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that because I think this is something for council to consider. The traditional way of dealing with a property is, as the planner stated, with the site plan control. But the official plan, the adopted or the approved official plan does say, prior to consideration for an application for zoning bylaw amendment or site plan approval, council shall be satisfied that. So in my thinking, it's council, and we heard from the community, can say we want to be satisfied on these particular items. And I think that information is new, and that's why the planner is suggesting we really need to have another meeting, because all of this information, how it impacts newer surrounding development, parking areas, whether it's how to deal with it in proximity to residential uses, which is in this case, if it's on a entrance point to the urban areas, which this is, so there's a lot of checks in addition to, as the planner said, market impact study. So there's a lot of things that can be considered by council if it so wishes. Hope that helps.
I'm silent.
Councillor Papp?
Well, I guess it boils down to, I'm going to be more simplistic. The proponent is now what, recalibrating his application to align with this? Or is, what I'm hearing is you asked him, could he hold off until these things were in place, and he's saying no. So at this second public meeting, is the idea that he's going to come back with some proposal to us? Walk me through this. I'm a little lost here because I'm not quite sure. I like the circular argument. Seems like his application is still valid.
That's correct.
Okay, so he's going to rejig it.
He's looking at, he has provided us information that he
Right.
has 2 tenants established. With respect to the official plan amendment, okay,
Right.
so let's talk about that application first. It's an urban highway designation.
Right.
There's an entertainment because it would be site-specific. It could look at being urban highway with a mixed residential component. So there's that opportunity. He may look at that option, he may not. So that's something he's gonna go back to. With respect to, again, Mr. Mayor had indicated, there is a number of criteria that council has to be satisfied with. He's gonna go back and gather that information so that it's all presented appropriately.
I don't mean to, but I appreciate it, Ms. Smythe, but I guess
Yes.
my question is, and I'm being facetious if you want to call it, then what's the purpose of the second public meeting? For him to just present that publicly to us and say, here's what I propose in response to, is that?
If there's any change to an application and like new
Yeah, I
information has
understand.
come forward, then yes, that is the requirement to present that
Well,
information.
Okay, but it may not be March, it could be.
It could be a year from now. The application's considered open, so
Okay.
it's essentially in his control at the moment.
All right,
So I've talked
go
to
ahead.
staff and
Yeah.
suggested that we perhaps remove the date
I agree.
from here, right? So I'll look to the mover and the seconder, or maybe we should have an amendment. Do we need an amendment to do that? Remove the date? So there,
Strike the date.
so that the council directs staff to commence convening to convene a second public meeting regarding proposed development, period.
Mr. Mayor, through to you. When I do have another opportunity to meet with the proponent and he does establish a reasonable timeframe, I will report that back to council.
That's better. That's better.
The clerk is suggesting as required would be the language that we could put in there. So is there Councillor Paps, Councillor Kersey, as required will be the amendment? Call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Now the motion is amended. Councillor Durley.
Yes, I was going to suggest that we're not going to resolve anything tonight, so let's call the question.
All right,
and
here we
move on.
go. Thank you. Let's move, so we have the motion as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. And now back to my report. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for catching that. I do have a report, and thanks to council for adding this. You'll see that this is a a memo, a news release that was sent to the Niagara Health System staff, physicians, volunteers. I received a copy today. As I attended the public launch of this, I probably still have mud on my pants because of this, because it was done out at the new site, or the proposed location for a new site. The minister, the mayor, the CEO, the chair of the board, etc., pulled off a item on the sign that says they are now doing this study, which is the major component here, $26.2 million planning grant as the next important step toward a new Niagara hospital, is what they said. I think it's important, as part of the minister's comments, to point out that the minister indicated, which is one of our concerns in this community because of the resolution that we have and the proposed development that's coming in the East Font Hill area, that the decision or any decisions on the UCC, the Urgent Care Center, have not been made. I know there was a resolution actually from the legislature back at the end of November to say that that site is the site, according to the legislature of the province, but that the UCC's portion is still open. And really, with the announcement of this planning grant, as I understand it, it's within this planning grant that those decisions will be made. So I did confirm that with those that made the announcement. That's the intention moving forward. So a $26.2 million planning grant as a next important step, and location of UCCs will be part of that. The other very important piece is that the NHS has taken over full responsibilities, so the board itself. There is no longer a supervisor for the Niagara Health System. The supervisor was in effect for many months, and it was 16 months ago that Dr. Smith made his report actually to the minister. So this has been a long process, and the final piece on this, in addition to the board taking over management of the NHS, is that Dr. Smith will actually continue in his leadership role and will continue actually as the CEO of the Niagara Health System. They are going to be recruiting a president and a secretary, I think it's called, to the board. But Dr. Smith will continue in that CEO role. It was said at the announcement that there's no further compensation for Dr. Smith in this, nor was there any compensation or additional compensation when he took over as supervisor. So that was a question out there in the community. So I think it's important as we move forward and think about and work on our development in East Font Hill, that we know that this planning grant is in place and that we get plugged into the planning grant as it moves forward. Any questions from councilors regarding that issue at this point? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to add that to the agenda. And thank you to the province for doing that $26 million planning grant. The next item, unfinished business. We do have a motion moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Lane, that the draft minutes of the joint meeting between the Pelham Council and the Pelham Library Board held on December 9th be received. Errors or omissions, questions, comments? I think the clerk is diligently working on trying to schedule that meeting. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you for that, so that we can all see the results or the progress on the how might we session. And now, presentation consideration of bylaws. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Lane. The Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass the same, and that the Mayor Clerk are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. Bylaw 3452, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw as amended for the property on the east side of Centre Street, lying north of Highway 20 West, Concession 7, Lot 9, 59R8. 378 Part 1 RP 59R9972 to rezone the lands from extractive industrial M3 zone to open space OS zone to permit a dog park. Number 2, bylaw 3453, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Antonio Nunziato for the purpose of a community improvement plan program at 1518 Pelham Street. And number 3, bylaw 3454, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter in a site plan agreement with Antonio Nunziato for lands located at 1518 Pelham Street, legally described as Lot 2 WS North Pelham Street Plan West Side, Plan 715, Pelham. Discussion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Look forward to those developments. As is our normal standard here, we do have a in-camera item. We will recess the council and have committee. So the motion has been moved by Council Rivak, seconded by Council Lane. The council recess the in-camera portion of the meeting and reconvene immediately following committee meeting scheduled for this evening. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. We'll take a brief 4-minute break. Thank you.
I told you midnight.
Oh, it's a leisure plan.
You wish you could.